All right. Well, welcome everyone to our kitchen table conversations. We are live here for our 65th conversation where we are at the kitchen table shaping new meanings of masculinity that are authentic, caring, and thoughtful. So we are very glad that all of you are joining us, whether you're joining us live in this moment or if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube or Facebook. Thank you so much for taking the time to join our conversation. And today, as you can see, we're very excited to be welcoming in a special guest star today, Nicole Matthews, and we will let her do an introduction here in just a minute, but very, very excited to have you with us here. I know this has been on the calendar for a couple months now, and we've just been looking forward to you being here with us, so thank you for that. So before we get into our conversation, I just want to take a couple minutes for us regulars to introduce ourselves or reintroduce ourselves. So my name is Sean Hayes and my pronouns are he, him, and his. And I am here in Duluth, Minnesota at Men as Peacemakers and pumped for the conversation. And I'll let my friends introduce themselves as well.
Hey, I'm the other Sean Elmquist, he, him. I also am here at Men as Peacemakers. I'm the Campus Prevention Coordinator. So yeah, glad to be here.
And hello, everybody. I'm Ed Heisler. I use he and him pronouns as well. And I'm also here in Duluth at Men as Peacemakers. Very good to be here.
Awesome. And yeah, Nicole, if you want to take some time and introduce yourself.
Bujunin Dinawe Maganang, Nicole Matthews, Jaganashimong, Manidu Beneshi Kwe Indigo, Migazin Dodame, Gawa Babaganakag in Dunjaba. Greetings, relatives. My English name is Nicole Matthews, and my Indian name means Spirit Bird Woman. I'm Eagle Clan, and my family's from the White Earth Band of Ojibwe. I'm the executive director of the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. I'm not in Duluth, but I feel like I need to come visit you guys soon. Our office is located in St. Paul, and we're a statewide tribal coalition and a national tribal technical assistance provider. It's good to be here with you all today.
Yes, and you definitely need to come visit. We would love that. So yeah, as we're getting going here, I know we usually like to ask our guests to kind of share a story about how you got involved with the kind of work that you're doing and really what it means to you on a deeper level. So if you want to, maybe we could start off there and then see where our conversation takes us today.
That sounds good. Well, I really got started in this movement years ago. I feel like maybe I was called to this movement from birth, being raised by a really strong Native woman who was always challenging social norms and gender roles, and always standing up for people's rights. But when I was in college, specifically talking about gender-based violence and recognizing that, I had been a victim of gender-based violence, and many of the women in my family had also been a victim of gender-based violence, and really thinking about the impact on our family, and then also looking at the historical trauma, having a grandfather who went to boarding schools, and just looking at that impact to our family pushed me to want to be more involved. And, I started volunteering on campus and got involved with a community-based program in Mille Lacs County, and did my internship there and ended up working there for like 4.5 years doing advocacy for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And then that really led me to being connected when the Tribal Coalition was first funded, it was brand new. The Tribal Coalitions it was the first time they received funding. And, having been connected to state coalitions for many years, was really excited about the possibility for what a tribal coalition might look like and the things that they might do. And so I very nervously threw my name in the hat, and was really excited when I was selected to be. I was the first staff person hired at MIWSAC at the Tribal Coalition, and the only staff person for a few years, and now it's been almost 22 years. And coming to MIWSAC, and being able to work and affect change in tribal coalition or tribal communities has been more of like a coming home, and has felt a much deeper connection for me to be able to really do this work in my own community, and to work with other Native people across the country and around Minnesota to address gender-based violence. And so, I see it really connected to my purpose. And, I think I would do this work whether I was paid to do it or not. And so getting a paycheck to do it is an added bonus, I guess. But it's certainly my purpose. And so I feel grateful every day that I get to do this work. Hi, Peng.
Hello, sorry I joined late here. So glad to be here with all of you.
That's real life, like the kitchen table.
Yep.
Sometimes we're a little late, and that's all right. So, well, thank you so much for starting us off and sharing a little bit about MIWSAC and how that all got going. I feel like I've heard pieces of the story, and so this is really cool for me. And so I guess I'm curious, like on a day-to-day, what does MIWSAC's work look like? And then how about for you? Like, are you doing those same things? I know you do a lot of traveling and speaking in front of Congress and different committees. And so what does that look like?
Yeah. When we started, we were just a statewide tribal coalition working with the tribes in Minnesota and the programs that were serving Native victims of sexual violence. And that's still at the core of what we do, is working with tribal communities and our urban Indian communities here in Minnesota to really address gender-based violence, sex trafficking and sexual violence in Minnesota. And then because we were, the only tribal coalition that was sexual assault specific, many of the other tribal coalitions are dual coalitions, so they work to address both domestic and sexual violence. We really started getting pushed into or called upon to provide national technical assistance and training to tribes and tribal grantees across the country. And then with the addition of our Garden of Truth research, where we interviewed 105 of our Native sisters in Minnesota who were used in prostitution and trafficking. And I think we did about a third of the interviews in Duluth. And so really, that has really helped us to understand the needs for Native victims of trafficking and the services that are needed and places where we might affect change and places that maybe there could be stronger interventions, places that need more attention and funding, policy issues, places for public awareness. And so that really helped to shape and inform our technical assistance on sex trafficking as well. So, we now have a staff of 16, and we have multiple national technical assistance projects. We provide technical assistance to Tribal Sexual Assault Services Program grantees. We have technical assistance on sex trafficking in Indian Country in Alaska. We have a Tribal Sexual Assault Clearinghouse project, National Tribal Sexual Assault Resource Center, and we provide technical assistance to Project Beacon grantees And then we additionally have a project that reaches beyond Indian country with other national TA providers. So we partner with the National Asian Pacific Islanders Ending Sexual Violence, Mujeres in Chicago, CISE that works with Sisters of Color Ending Sexual Assault, as well as the National Sexual Violence Resource Center and the Resource Sharing Project on a project called Elevate Uplift that really works to deepen the understanding of sexual assault. It really started with the Sexual Assault Demonstration Initiative to strengthen the sexual assault services response in dual agencies. So oftentimes when you see agencies that are providing services to both domestic violence and sexual assault kind of takes a back seat and people really focus on domestic violence. So really worked with programs to strengthen their sexual assault response. And that program started with the Resource Sharing Project as the lead applicant, and we were all partners. And this last cycle, it was decided that it should be led by one of the partners who were a community of color-led organization. So MIWSAC took over as the lead in that project. And the two mainstream organizations, the Resource Sharing Project and NSVRC, took a back seat and took a little less funding to create more space for the communities of color-led organizations. So that is also a really incredible project that and partnership that we have and that we're working on. And for me, because I've been, doing this work for a long time, and our work has been national and sometimes international, and so I do get called on a lot to speak about providing services from an Indigenous lens, to speak about trafficking. I have been honored to sit on the Trilateral Working Group on violence against Indigenous women between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And, I've been working closely with the Guam Coalition to work with there because they have a large Indigenous population, but get fewer resources because they are geographically isolated. And as a U.S. territory, highly militarized, and the impact of colonization is very real. But they are impacted by our laws and policies, but don't have a voice to vote and aren't able to impact policy in that way. So really been trying to build strong partnerships with them too, and provide, resources and training and support to their people and their services in Guam. So it's just some of the work that we do.
I was going to say, so a whole lot in other ways. Yeah, well, thank you so much. I mean, I don't even think I knew about all of that. So thank you for that. And I want to open it up to our friends here. I know we've all known Nicole for a while, some of us. And so just wondering what is on folks' minds as we listen to Nicole share.
Well, it's really fun to be on this particular conversation with Nicole and all of the friends. It's just really fun to hear the story, sort of the purpose origin story of where your work came from, Nicole, and then to MIWSAC predates some of my work, but just to have seen a part of the growth and the development of all the things that you are doing and influencing now is just incredible to see. And I know for myself, doing things like coming to your annual conference and going to trainings that were being held were like key ways that I both had my own awareness and knowledge around different forms of gender-based violence, but also like the relationship between that and colonization as a person who grew up in a small town, border town, on a reservation, and then also an expansion to think about the role of things like healing in the process of preventing and addressing sexual violence and other forms of gender-based violence in community. And so I just really appreciate the influence that you've had on me personally, but it's really amazing to see the way that you've played a role, and you and whole networks of people in actually creating what you were describing at the end there, a situation where communities of color and Indigenous leadership is emerging in the way where the wisdom and the knowledge and the experiences that actually can help get us to better places as a community are coming forward more fully. So that's on my mind.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And like some of our guiding principles and our values at MIWSAC are really around how do we decolonize our work, and what does that mean, and what are the values that we hold up as Indigenous people, and how do those live in our policies, in our work with each other, in our practices. And last week we were in California for the tribal TA providers meeting, and we had to talk about what is our landscape, the landscape for MIWSAC around our work, right? And then what are our gifts? And really, so many, I think, organizations think about all the things they can do. Like, we're an expert in housing, or we're an expert in sexual assault, or we're an expert in whatever. And for us, it really is leaning into those values. I think our expertise is trying to create an organization and a space that lives our values. And making sure that, when I started doing the work, it was, if you have to work 60 hours a week, well, then that's just what you have to do. And in many regards, I mean, that's what built the movement, right? And so I'm not saying that there was no value in that, because that's definitely what built the foundation for the work that we all are, doing today. But I don't want our staff to feel like they have no time for their families. They have no time for things that bring them joy, that they have no balance, that they're just living to work, right? And so, implementing a 32-hour work week, providing, funding like self-care funds so that people can really take care of themselves, finding beautiful places to have a staff retreat that's both, a place of work, but also really generative, where people can be together, can laugh together, can maybe go hiking or walk into the ocean together and swim. And so I think a lot of our strengths, we know a lot of things, right? But I feel like our strengths is really in leaning into our Indigenous values. And, in the 20 plus years I've been there, I've learned a lot of really hard lessons, and have also learned to lean into some of those really hard lessons, and try to also stay open to hearing feedback, because I am not perfect. None of us are perfect, right? We are all imperfect humans. And when people provide feedback, even sometimes when it hurts a little bit, it's a place where we have an opportunity to grow, to hear another person's perspective about how we've impacted them. And so, I think that's really at the core of who we are at MIWSAC, and the work that we try to do comes from that space.
Well, I think what's resonating, what you just shared there, Nicole, for me, was that the living in our values is so critically important. I think about that in the last couple of months here, about lessons I'm learning about the relationships that I've cultivated in the Southeast Asian communities, and with some really fierce movement leaders, because we're really new here, right, to this country in many ways. And I think about how we get to places of conflict and how those values really allow us to principally struggle together and not get to places of like, oh, how dare Peng moves in this way with me. He must not be, he's betraying our friendship at this moment. But actually, in actuality, most of the time, it's actually the values that we're actually aligned to, you know, and I think that we see this so much, whether it be in domestic violence or sexual violence, where families are torn apart. And it's like some people in the family members side with the person who's caused the harm, and some side with the person who's surviving the harm, and they feel pitted against each other.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can reorientate our community to values around violence and standing up to violence, then actually what we're going to stand up to is that violence, and the side that we're going to be on is all of our people's side.
Right.
Be against that violence, right? And I think so it requires some reshifting, but it's really hard work. It's really hard work. And why it's really hard work is because, to your point about creating more generative spaces for people to be in relationship with each other, is that we have to build in every single way that's possible, that's needed to be built, as siblings, as community members, as comrades, as colleagues, as coworkers, as leaders. Like every way in which role that we play to one another, we have to build in all those ways, meaning building relationships with each other, be connected and interconnected in those ways, that at any moment, if a conflict should arise or whatnot, that we could at least leverage those relationships and those ways that we've built to keep the relationships going, right? Or to keep us moving together in principled ways. Otherwise, if we only built as colleagues and we only built in the organization only, then when tensions arise, then it's easy for us to say, okay, we're a mismatch and I'm going to just leave, right? All it takes is, nowadays, I've been in so many spaces in the last couple of weeks and months about like talking about conflicts in organizations, and the conflicts these days are, you looked at me the wrong way.
Yes.
I'm not going to talk to you anymore. It's like, what? Like, can we have a little bit of a deeper political conversation here about like our own political lives in a way that's much more deeper than just that, right? And so that all goes to the values point that you talked about there, that I'm resonating with me a lot, because in this work it's hard, and it's hard enough on the people that we're working with, but we also have to be able to say, how is it that we're also modeling and building community with one another as well too, you know, as we're trying to survive and thrive in the environment that we're in.
I agree. And I was thinking, Peng, when you were talking, so one of the things that we have been working on lately, because, you know, as you grow, like when it was me, you know, there was one person and then we had 3 of us for a very long time. And now we have 16 people, which is 16 different personalities, 16 different work styles, 16 different communication styles, and different generations, right? And in all that, there can be a rub in those differences, those tensions, that and so having to really work on some of those things, right? And so we have been developing right now. We're going to try on like some accountability circles, but it's not about me holding you accountable. It's about me holding me accountable, and then hearing feedback on that. Because really the only person I have any power over changing is me. Even as someone that's in a position of power, like, you know, positional leadership, I still am only responsible for changing myself, right? And so having a leadership or having a accountability circle where we are practicing how we hold ourselves accountable, and then hearing the feedback about that from other you know, our colleagues, I think has the potential to be really impactful, not only within our organization, but within our families, within our communities, and can really build a different practice for all of us about what that means, right? Instead of doing the, you did this, you did that, like, that's not cool. Like, now I'm mad and I'm not going to talk to you, or I'm going to, carry this that's going to impact our work, because it impacts our work, right? And so, I think the more we can do some of that and relationship building, I think, is really important, but, relationships have problems too. So, and so there's like the, emotional maturity, like people are at all different levels of, of that. And, I think back to when I started this work, one, I didn't know what I was doing, honestly. Like when I started here, 22 years ago, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what Public Law 280 was. Like I learned and I had to grow, and people mentored me and were patient with me. And I made a lot of mistakes and I said a lot of not great things and probably hurt people that unintentionally. And so I think, another piece is like, part of building leadership is also like, how do we create space for people to also make mistakes and recover from those mistakes, because it's the recovery and the openness to recover from those mistakes, I think, that matters more than the mistake, right? It's whether you're open to recovering or to making amends. I hate the term amends because it seems very, I don't know, Christian, or I don't know what it is, but it feels some sort of something that I don't know that I resonate with that term, but the sentiment of that. So really, how we want to, do something different. And yeah.
And people have to be willing to let go of, I think the thing is, like, people have to be willing to also let go of what they know to be true for themselves as well too, right? Because if you're going to be, and we're going to be in community, then there has to be some suspension of my own certainty of how the world functions.
Right.
It's that blendingness that I think I saw Becky sent out on our one list sir the other day of like, how does the snowflake, with her circles, and I know Ed and Nicole have seen it, and Sean Hayes has seen it in some ways too, but of like the snowflake, how does the snowflake survive in the raging fire, is transcendence. And I think that, to your point there, is it's reminding me that we have to continuously transcend in the ways in which we are building, community.
Yes, I agree. I heard someone say a long time ago, if you're not growing, then you're dying. And that it's a very morbid statement, but I also, in some ways, like if we're not growing, like we're staying stagnant, right? We're not, so we want to make sure that we continue to grow and to be open to growing. Because I learn stuff every day. I learn stuff from my 6-year-old grandson. I learned stuff from my kids. I learned stuff from this golden retriever dog that's really trying hard to get my attention right now. So he's trying to chew up all the things. But I learned stuff from, not just from elders, but from our young people and from people, of all ages, ethnicities, genders, backgrounds. And so, also being open. Yes. Trying to make him behave, but he's a golden retriever, so he's got golden retriever energy.
Yeah, I think, Nicole, about you mentioned a little while back about the work of decolonizing as well in all of this, and I think that's a lot of what this conversation is about as well. But I just think about the ways that does point us towards life and towards balance and towards relationship with things. And many of us have that experience of being the 60+ hour push, build. But I really appreciate how you describe the movement, particularly folks of color in the movement, like having to build in that way for an entire period of time, right? Like that's an entire season of time that people built in that way. And then I think what I notice now, and what part of what you and Peng are describing, is that we're going through processes of healing and settling and being sustainable and generating life. And I think that's really instructive. I mean, at Menace Peacemakers, and when we think about when we think broadly about prevention beyond things like
I'm
just
still here, just grabbing the dog. Sorry, Ed.
the dog needs love too. So, but beyond just doing the things like the education about the issues, which is super, super, super important and central as well. But learning the ways that, like, we may have grown up learning that our performance is what gives us value, or that we need to push ourselves to the absolute brink in order to be good enough, or that there's only and exclusively a right way and only and exclusively a wrong way, or that we should have control over certain things. And there actually is a more life-giving way to make sure that our own selves are nourished, to nourish our relationships, to understand our purpose and our value and what we bring, to mend relationships. And like, as you and Pang are talking there, I mean, I think that's part of the it's that way of teaching that is showing rather than telling people, and sort of creating a pathway for it for broader and broader groups of people too.
Totally agree. I totally agree. And you know, like, having that that balance, like, you know, I think we learned a lot during the pandemic, right? Like, certainly one of the hardest lessons we've, you know, certainly didn't need to, maybe we did need to hear it that hard, because it, you know, when we were not changing until then. People were still going to, like, do stuff to, you know, continue working themselves into the ground. But we learned, because we all had to pause on some level. And I remember sitting early in the pandemic, Ed, and you might have been on this call too, with Norma Wong, and she was talking about that Mother Earth is telling us to pause, like, is telling us we need to pause, and people are not listening, because people just kept going. Like, how many of us just continued to have 1,000 Zoom calls and still have 1,000 Zoom calls, right? Like, and so sometimes we have to have really hard lessons, because we're not listening, we're not paying attention. But the universe will tell us sometimes when we're not paying attention, and when we're not listening, and the universe will tell us in ways that maybe we weren't ready for, but maybe will be the only way that we're going to get it. And, you know, it's not to say that there aren't moments when we have to put in a 60-hour work week, because there's times where we have a lot of work to do that has to get done, right? And that's just what it is. And then there's times that we could put in a 20-hour work week, because we need that time to rest. And so how do we, you know, and you also talked about, like, not the either or, right? Like, not the dichotomous thinking, but the both and. How do we make space for both things to exist and to honor both? Because I also think that it saddens me sometimes when I hear conversations of people who, like, I have heard a lot of conversations about people putting down other generations, like, oh, it's just the baby boomers that, you know, we just need to, they're just, like, stuck, blah, 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 or it's this generation, or, you know, and I think it's all BS, like, right? Like, I think we all have things that were specific to our generations, and also we all don't live in a box. Like, we all are not the same. And we all have, you know, gifts of our generation, and contributions to how we got to where we are. And then some things that maybe were not so helpful, that we have, thankfully, we continue to grow and to learn and to elevate. But that does not mean that people of those generation don't have any value. And sadly, I hear conversations like that you know, it makes me sad, because you, like, wait, I'm like, okay, I'm, you know, in my 50s, I'm, like, reaching elder status. And I don't want to feel like I'm less than when I get there, right? Because in our community, like, elder status is held in really high regard. So I would hate to get there and then for people to talk about me like I don't have any value. I just talked in a big old circle, and I don't know that I even got to everything you said, Ed.
I think it definitely to what you were sharing there, Nicole, reminded me of your accountability piece of like being accountable to myself and the responsibility that I have in there. I think so much of the time we always look to others, and it's easier, right, to look outward rather than inward, and the looking inward is the hardest part. And then understanding then what my responsibility is. And I think that that's the part of accountability that is vitally important, is what is actually my responsibility in this that I would need to shift or do differently, rather than just placing the blame somewhere else, because it's so much more easier to say it's Sean's fault every day than rather to name that it is my thing to do, And so I think that that's the other piece too, is like, and it doesn't help. I think the other thing is it doesn't help in somewhat in the context of this conversation that we're having too, is that the environment and the conditions that we live in, and the community, and the ways in which people and the media also plays a role in shaping the way in which we are in relationship and shaping the conversations that we all have as well too, that we are in this place, in this moment, in this country, in a space where it's like very, very quite polarized in the way in which people think more black and white than what it used to be,
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that, about how, like, just the space, the time we are in right now. I keep thinking about like 50 years from now, like what will be written in the history books about this particular time that we are in, where there has been so much, unrest, and so much, calls for action, with some action and maybe some shortfalls. And but it's just such an interesting time we are in. And I think a time when we're really being called to change and to shift and to look different and to be different, and for our communities to be different, for our leadership to be different. And it's exciting and scary. And, growing up in South Minneapolis and going to, elementary school only blocks from where George Floyd was murdered, and seeing the city burn, and seeing cities across the nation that burned, and that, had similar things happen in their community, and seeing women's marches, and just all of the things that have happened in the last 5 years has been I couldn't have ever imagined this was going to happen in our time, right? But maybe that was just, like I said, like a call. It was a call to wake up. Maybe we were sleeping and we needed to a little push to wake up and to really see, because it's not that people were all of a sudden racist and divisive. That stuff was already there. And there's just been some stuff that has shined a spotlight on it, right? So that people can't hide it anymore. And people are feeling really emboldened to show it and put it out there. So, yeah.
I'm just popping in to say I'm really appreciating like all of the places that this conversation is going, because I feel like we've touched on relationship building and connection, and how important that is within our communities to prevent violence of this kind, right? And then also talking about the accountability pieces of how we can be accountable, and we need to be accountable to ourselves and our families and our communities, to continue elevating. I really like that, elevating. I think of it as leveling up, as we're doing that growth, because it's constant. And I'm really appreciative of this conversation. And shifting gears just a little bit, I know that, yesterday was the first day of Indigenous Peoples Month. And so, feeling very excited about that and wanting to wish everyone a happy Indigenous Peoples Month. And when it comes to that, Nicole, I'm curious, how do you celebrate? Does November look different for you in your life, in your community? And then how can other communities really celebrate y'all and learn more about and connect with Indigenous communities in a good way?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we had an Indigenous Peoples Day last month, in a state that now recognizes that statewide. And now we have, Native American Heritage Month, which is a little conflicting because it's in November, which is Thanksgiving. So there's, a little bit of conflict with that. But I think there's a lot of ways to recognize this month. I think, for all of us to maybe to learn something we didn't know about Indigenous people and Indigenous communities. I think it's also a time to, to support Indigenous businesses and designers. Like I love shopping, and retail therapy is one of my favorites. And so, we have like Sarah Egerton Howes with Heartberry up in Fond du Lac, that is an incredible designer and a great business to support. On our staff, we have Afton Delgado, who's an incredible artist and has her own t-shirt and sweatshirt line that with some really beautiful designs. And so there's people that we can support, Indigenous designers, Indigenous companies or businesses like Birch Bark Books. And we have many really amazingly talented authors, Indigenous authors from Minnesota, excuse me, that we could support, including, Anton Troyer and David Troyer, and which are my cousins. But I think we also should go out and be in community and build relationships. Oftentimes we see people that reach out and build relationships only when there's a grant due or a deliverable that they have to get done. And so, it's also an invitation to come and visit our communities and to get to know us and to build reciprocal relationships, not just transactional relationships, and to learn more about our communities, and to tell the whole truth about Thanksgiving, not the fairy tale version of it, but to stop spreading the myths around Thanksgiving, and to start telling the real truth and the real story, and to not continue the fairy tale. And, my family, we love any opportunity to get together and eat. So, every year it's always, I don't feel like I'm celebrating Thanksgiving as I'm just having an excuse to cook and bake. And, our organization, every day, we start our day every morning with a 9 a.m. check-in, just to check in as human beings, not to be like, what are you doing today? What's on your schedule? But like, how are you? And we started that when we all were quarantined for the pandemic. And we are still doing that. And we've added some things. And one of the things we've added is the elders meditation of the day. And then we all go around and say 2 things that we're thankful for that day. Because when you start to think of the things that you are grateful for or thankful for, it changes changes your brain, it changes your thinking pattern. And you start to look at the world a little differently. And you start to realize there's a lot of things to be grateful for. And even in my most, difficult times, there has been things that I can still be grateful for. And sometimes it's maybe just because I opened my eyes today. And sometimes maybe it's that I still have tears to cry. But there's always something to be grateful for. And so being able to hold space for that and to have gratitude. I think another thing people can do during November is, to support a Native organization. There's a lot of really amazing organizations and tribal organizations. Of course, MIWSAC, I'm going to say MIWSAC because it's where I work. But, there's the Division of Indian Works. There's so many programs up in Duluth that have incredible programming, and in Minneapolis and in St. Paul and nationally. So find out who the programs are in your community and make a donation. Even a donation of $20 is incredible, right? Like we have someone who donates like $10 a month and has done it for like 2 or 3 years. That leads up, that adds up after a while. So, and it also means that they are thinking about our organization, that they care about our cause, and we appreciate it. So, ICO, and there's the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center is really struggling right now, and I'm sure would really appreciate any donations as well, as they are rebuilding. And there's a community listening session tonight, so wanting the community to really help as they start to rebuild that program, and so it's strong, back to where it was. And November holds a special place for me because it's my birthday month. So,
Well, happy birthday.
Always
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
I would just say quickly that as you share all of those great opportunities for ways to connect and build relationships, that Indigenous Peoples Day and Native American Heritage Month and such are great opportunities to build relationship, and they aren't actually just a day or a month in time to focus on stuff, but the opportunity and the responsibility is to build different relationship with Native communities, Indigenous communities. And I love, you mentioned, if you're here in Duluth, definitely can support MIWSAC. And then you can make your way down to Indigenous First and check out, there's like all sorts of books like the ones that Nicole was talking about. There's art, there's all sorts of foods and stuff that you can look through and purchase. But an opportunity too is to learn, to take those opportunities to learn and then to continue building relationships. So as a person who comes from small white town, I mean, one of the things to me is even the small ways, like our job isn't to try to become native people. Native
right.
Cultures are cultures that have existed for a long time. And that's a set of cultural practices and belief systems that people have. But the leadership and the wisdom that exists around how to be in relationship with the land and the place and other people and other beings is huge, and anybody can learn from that. And think about, I think you used the word reciprocal relationship, Nicole.
Okay.
I keep doing
I've been called worse, Ed. It's fine.
Nicole. I think you mentioned reciprocal relationship, and so what does that mean to us? It can be as small as thanking the lake when you're by it, and picking up some trash, or noticing something that needs taking care of there, that builds a little bit of reciprocity, and
Yes.
It grows from there over time. So those invitations that you just put our way, Nicole, are great opportunities to build a practice over the long time.
Yeah, can you imagine if everyone like had that belief or that practice, right? To like not just take. So when before you harvest something, you put a little offering and say a little prayer before. And, just that reciprocity, not only with each other, but with the land and with the universe, I think, I feel like that would just change so much.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I've learned over the years as I um, continue to learn about indigenous ways and practices, that some of it is actually so similar to the ways in which Hmong people actually look at the world and relate to the world, of like every being and everything has spirits to it, and that you're not to exactly to your point. During this time of the year, Hmong people are doing New Year celebrations, and so in the old country and back in Laos, in Southeast Asia, people would go to their farm, to their rice fields or whatever, and they would go call the spirits of the rice fields and the animals, and they would call them home, because they would do a spiritual calling for those spirits as well too. So they get to eat during this time of the year as well too. So the offering that you're talking about there definitely resonates really much to my own community lived experiences, and so many similarities of like I think that I've heard people talk about trees and the significance of it, and we've learned that even within the Hmong community, that when we travel to Southeast Asia, about our relationship to the drum and what its significance is in the Hmong life as well too. So I see a lot of parallels and similarities in many of those ways and ways of being as well too, because it's really about a way of understanding how to be in relationship with nature in a way that honors not only nature itself, but us in it, right? Because we think that we're the ones who control everything and we're humans and whatever, but actually, to many of what you were sharing earlier, Nicole, about the universe and Mother Nature, we're just probably a small drop in the bucket of all the other things that are in existence as well too.
Yeah, I think of like, probably about 20 years ago now, I went to New Zealand and met with the Maori people. And when they would introduce themselves, they always introduced like what their body of water was, like their connection to the body of water of their people, and then to like their mountain or their land or something. And so for, Indigenous people across the globe, for all of us, like we have a deep connection to our land, not only to our people, but to our land and to our plant relatives, and to, the animals and to everything. And so, and yeah, like to look at, I always think it's interesting when I go to different places to look at the trees and what what the plants look like. And, I was in Palm Springs last week, which is a very different space than Minnesota. It was a little jarring to come home, I will tell you that, from like 80 to 30. But it's always very interesting to me in places like California and Florida is the palm trees are almost always bent towards the water, or towards, like, I'm always like, and in Palm Springs it's like desert, right? So you could see that they were bent, and I was like, which, like, you get a little turned around, I'm like, which way is the ocean? Like, what are they pointing to? Like, I want to know what they're pointing to. But I love seeing the difference in that, and also seeing people's connection to their land, and seeing, the different ways that people give offering. Like, we use tobacco when we pray, and other people use corn pollen, and looking at the different things that people use based on the communities that they're from, in that reciprocity, right? The giving back, the not just taking, because that's not a value of ours, is just to take, but to also to give back as well.
Well, I know that we're coming up on time here. I don't know how these hours always fly by, especially when we have such incredible guests joining us. I feel like we could talk for a couple more hours. And typically, we'll usually kind of ask for everybody's final thoughts. And I feel like a lot of that has maybe been shared already. And I kind of want to switch it up and just maybe ask you one last question, Nicole, about when you think about the future and future generations, what is something that you feel hopeful for?
I really do. Well, I feel hopeful about a lot of things, and I think our, generation that are coming up behind us are really incredible, and have really incredible, fearless leadership. And I look at my 19-year-old daughter, who I feel like is maybe my mini me. But she's fearless in a way that I wasn't, right? So I'll be the one to put in the 60-hour weeks, but she'll be the one to like tear some shit down and be like, nope, that's not how we're doing it. And is not afraid to challenge systems and policies and push on things. And that is inspiring to me. And it makes me feel like we're in really good hands. And it makes me feel hopeful that I can see a time that we won't be talking about ending gender-based violence, that there will be no more violence, and that gives me just so much hope.
Well, thank you. That is an amazing answer. So thank you again, Nicole, for joining us today here at the kitchen table. We are, I think all of us, I speak for when I say we are all very grateful for your time and getting to share this conversation with you. And we are thankful for all of you who've been able to tune in and watch this conversation, whether you've done it live or maybe you're checking this out later after the fact. We are just very grateful to be in community with each and every one of you and to be working together to build these reciprocal relationships and deeper connections in our communities. So as a reminder for all of you, we hold these conversations every other Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we would love it for you all to join us at the next live kitchen table conversation, which is on November 16th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we're very excited to be welcoming in yet another incredible guest star to our conversation, and that is Sang Zhang from Transforming Generations. So we're very much looking forward to that conversation and talking a little bit about Transgender Day of Remembrance at that time as well. So please tune back in for that. Don't forget, you can like us on our Facebook page. You can find us on YouTube. Click subscribe. We want all of you to connect with us deeper. And thank you again for taking the time and spending some time with us today here. All right, everyone, take good care.